In the following tutorial, we're going to take a look at one of the most important concepts behind Actionscript coding, and that is this idea of three basic ingredients that you're always going to use. I call it EAT, you can call it T, or you can call it ETA. It doesn't really matter what you use as an acronym as long as it always has those three letters and that you understand what each one does. The first thing is an event. You always have something that triggers the code to run. Now, that's something that happens when you enter a frame and it has code on the frame, or sometimes you click on a button, and if you click on the button, something else will happen. So that's the event, and then you have an action that is that event is causing. And of course, we have all sorts of different types of events. Now, one of the great things about Actionscript 3.0 is that you have the same event model used throughout all the different types of events, and we'll get to that at a much later time. The other thing that we have are actions. Actions, which are really called functions, tell us what to do, such as go to a web page, or play a timeline, or play a sound. They tell us how or what to do. The other thing that we have is targets, and the target is what movie clip do we want to play, or what button did we press on for an event. And it's used all the time. Now, sometimes targets are implied, and that means that you don't really have to name the target for it to know which is going to be the target. It's pretty obvious to Flash. And those are what are called scope. That's an idea that we'll be getting into later about it, that can get a little confusing, but in a simple example, it's pretty easy to understand. So let's take a look at the code that we have written so far. So far, we have just stop. Now, if we think about the three ingredients, those three ingredients are even in this simple of a script. The first thing we have is an event. And since this code is on frame 1, the event is coming into the frame that has the code on it. Now, if we were to move the code to a later frame, like to frame 25, then the timeline would get a chance to play until it reached frame 25. Then it would encounter the code, and that would be the event of the code running. So the event is coming into the frame where the code is, wherever that frame is. The next thing we have is an action, and we can tell that the action is obviously stop, which means stop the timeline from playing. The last thing is the target. Now, here's where it gets a little bit weird because of scope. And right now, we have a scoped target because we haven't specified. It's just implied that we're talking about the timeline the code is on. Now, if we wanted to be more obvious about what object we're talking about stopping, then we can put in some code beforehand. And this will change things just a little bit, because what we have here is what's called a global function. As soon as we add a target to it, this dot stop, now we're changing it into a method, because we have the object before, then the dot, and then whatever the method is. So just a slight difference there, but what we've put in is a scoping keyword called this. Now, this tells us that we're going to stop this timeline, wherever the code is. It's still kind of implied, but it's a little bit more obvious. Now, we can also do another thing in Actionscript 3, and that is we can put object parent, this parent, dot stop, and that makes it even a little bit more obvious about what it is. Now, we're going to be having other things like buttons, like my button underscore btn dot add event listener, and you can see it comes up there. So this right here is a target, and then we have an add event listener, which is an action that we're going to be doing. And of course, when is it going to run? What's the event for this happening? Is when the code happens. Now, if we add other code to this event listener, of course, we will have a different event for that button itself, but we're not really talking about that. The most important concept here is just that actions, events, and targets are part of every script, no matter how small. So let's go on to actually doing some syntax stuff in the next tutorial. So go on.